These are some of the things that I experimented with. I started out first with the JB Quick, thinking that would work, and it wasn't too awfully bad once I got going with it and got a little practice. And that's the big thing, is working in this method to try and to replicate troweling on Zimmerit at a 1/16 scale. It's going to be a little bit more difficult than using a big trowel and troweling on globs of the Zimmerit on a tank. The JB Quick was okay. The only problem was that you had to wait about 5 minutes. So it was started or set up to where you got to the point where you weren't just taking virtually a very soupy mixture and just trying to spread it across, and it would kind of, the beads would kind of fall back together. So you had to wait about 5 minutes. So it almost set, but the problem is you only had about 30 seconds of working time, and all of a sudden it really starts setting up quick. My next experiment was with using some 2-part epoxy, 5-minute epoxy. This happens to be from Harbor Freight Tools. The problem is that it was getting stringy. You start pulling trowel up and to go to the next group, and you had these strings of epoxy over. So that didn't work out very well. Then I thought, well, maybe a Tamiya putty. It's just a basic type putty. And I started putting that on, and even working right away, it starts hardening on the surface and not underneath. So when you put it on, even working pretty fast, you're scraping a hard surface, which gives you all of these scrape marks. So that was kind of useless. So, and I tried with JB Weld, but this time I used the regular set, which takes several hours to set. And first experiment was to put it on, spread it over using a piece of scrap plastic, just spread it around. And then when it was on there, and this was just a little bump I put in there to simulate going over that, I tried working with it. And again, really didn't look like it was working out really well here. This side here was actually, I had let it set up for a few minutes, and I came back and went over it again and started seeing some improvement. So I figured that the best thing to do would be to use that JB Weld and then try and let it set for a while. So I mixed it up, applied it on, let it set and came back, and voila, I think I struck upon something here. Now again, all new to me, so these are actually not only experiments, but they're my practice sets. So the object is, I cut that blade. I probably need to make a little bit longer in the stroke. I did about a 5/16 stroke, which is about the width of the blade. And I probably should maybe go about 3/8 or 7/16 of an inch. And then the thing is going to be practice. And you don't want it to be perfect, because even on the tanks it's perfect. So you can see some parts here where I came down and I do the next row, and I deliberately would be off a little bit. In fact, I'd even pull up the groove slightly and then move it over just to give it that little difference. And again, it's not perfect, but I think this is going to be my process, and I'm going to start with the tank. Here I'm going to cut a piece of hacksaw blade. It's 18 teeth per inch, and I'm going to cut it about 5/16 of an inch wide. First, I'll mark my cutting line on the blade. I cut in here with these bolt cutters. Line that up where I want to cut it. And scooch down real hard. And there I have my little set of teeth. Okay, I squared that up a little bit. Doesn't have to be too awfully neat. The most important thing is the arrangement of the teeth on the end. And I'm going to take this wood stick, and I'm going to super glue the section of teeth to the wood stick. And you want this to be pretty strong because you'll not only be pushing down on it, but probably be cleaning those teeth off periodically. And this is what I have. Okay, the next thing that we have to do with our little trowel is to clean it up a little bit. When you have hacksaw teeth, they kind of lean, the teeth are kind of canted toward one direction. And that's okay. It won't be very noticeable for what we're doing because the epoxy will move around a little bit. But I had noticed that they're not only that, but they're off. The teeth are also offset a little bit. So if you go to scrape, you're not going to scrape with all of the teeth in a line. So I took a little honing stone and honed the end straight. Take a little sharpness off of it, dull it up a little bit. Then honed particularly on that side that I'm going to be pressing against the epoxy, so that you can see there's a little bit of shine on here, so all of the teeth will actually make contact with the surface. You can also do the other side if you happen to use the other side as well. As making this mini-Zimmerit has been a discovery process as I've been going along here. I've been changing things. So what I'm going to do is all of these video clips that I've put together thus far, I'm going to just pull sections out of them to show you what the finished pieces look like. The actual process, though, I've changed, as I said along the way. So what I'm going to do is give you an example of what I finally came up with is the best of this process. What I'm using is JB Weld, not the quick, just the regular JB Weld. I'm going to mix up a batch and I'm going to put it on a little sample piece of plastic here, piece of styrene, to give an idea of exactly what I think is the ideal way of making this mini-Zimmerit. Just mixing up the JB Weld and get it thoroughly mixed. And timing is of importance here. If you let it set, if you use it before it sets too much, the grooves will start flattening out because the fixture still because the mixture is still soft. So once we get all of this troweled out, we're going to wait 1.5 hours. Now here I'm in Florida, in the midst of this COVID virus startup in mid-March, and kind of getting a little boring being self-isolated, not quarantined, we don't have it, but self-quarantined or self-isolated. So I decided to do this, which I've been wanting to do for almost a year now. Okay, we've got that applied. Again, this is not the finished Zimmerit. We're going to come in and do little staggered strokes. Clean off our brush. And I only made one of these. I made a spare one, but one main one that I really worked hard on getting those right shapes in there. I also made for the turret, because the turret face, just on the front side of the turret, has different grooves. And so that's what this came out of. I took a piece of ABS and just filed in some grooves in there because they're wider, almost twice as wide as the ones in the rest of the tank and on the sides of the turret. So Again, we're going to wait an hour and a half. Don't wait an hour. Don't wait a half an hour. Don't wait 2 hours. 2 hours, it starts thickening up too much. An hour and a half is pretty much ideal. And I'm running an air conditioning house about 79 degrees right now. It's been about an hour and a half, and I'm just going to spread this down a little bit and flatten out all of these peaks. And the reason why I'm doing that is just kind of give me a fresh start and to where I can see the patterns. Now, just pretend we're doing this at full scale, but at 1/16, we're just going to be using a 1/16 size scale trowel. So I'm going to come, the trowel is about 5/16 of an inch wide, and I'm going to lay it flat, and I'm going to make about a 3/8 of an inch stroke. And I'm going to come over and then I'll start the next row, put another 3/8 of an inch, and the next row has a little added feature here. You can, as you get to the end, you can kind of do a little dip up. You can see this little curve here, and then kind of overlap it a little bit. It looks like that when somebody was doing the troweling, that's for some reason maybe to break the bead that they were doing or something, but it kind of gives an end to each one of these strokes. And when you get to an obstruction like this, you can actually work backwards a little bit, cleaning the bottom of your trowel off now and then. So now you can see the patterns that we have here. And I'm going to just do a little test here. I'm going to take my turret trowel, front of the turret trowel, and try that out as a comparison here. So again, what I'll do is I'll just flatten out a few of these. They went a little bit over the hour and a half, so start seeing it's getting pretty thick. Okay, there we go. When you're done using your trowel, you're going to continue doing some more. Get those teeth cleaned out. Comparing that with the smaller grooves, you can see that there's kind of an inconsistency in the tanks themselves. Here it's definitely, they're wider, but not quite as wide as on this one, which is more like what I was doing here. So if you want to, and if you want to simulate a little sagging, like it was dripping down, you can rub that down a little bit like that, just like you see in this photo here. It's kind of went on and it's kind of dripped down a little bit. And we'll continue with segments of the other videos that I had pre-recorded prior to this, when I didn't come up with the actual process that I want to use, and then we'll get started on that. First thing I'm going to start with is the back side here. The back side was removable. It was actually assembled on the tank when I got it, but it is removable. This is the upper hull, and as you can see, I've done the complete side above the fenders, except for where that one fender and the corner fender was removed from the track fenders, and Zimmerited basically, and it probably did it about 3 seconds here. Mixed up enough and went so far, and then let that dry and come back. If you happen to go across a hole or a cutout or something, and where actually these small ones might get closed up, come right back quickly and just kind of clean it out a little bit so you know that there's something there. You don't go looking for it later on. Try and get as much as you can before it all sets up. Otherwise, you're going to be working with the great feature of the JB Weld is being extremely hard. Turn that over. You can see the other side. Got that all done as well. Might be a couple little pieces sticking up. You can always hit that with some sandpaper or wire brush. Get that down. And I think that looks fairly good. And we've got the front of the tank done. And you can see here the ball machine gun, which I believe it's hard to see in the pictures whether or not the gun barrel is just missing or the whole ball is But in this particular tank that I'm modeling, it just looks dark there, so I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll have to do some more research into that. Again, clean anything down, sandpaper, especially your edges. You want to take your edges down so that when it fits up against something else, the other part of the tank, it'll fit nice. Here's the lower hull. You can see I got some JB weld on there. I'll have to clean that off before I put everything together, although that might be underneath. And did the underneath of the hull, underneath of the front of the tank. Again, coming back, cleaning down. I got some up here on these surfaces, and I got some up here on these surfaces, and I cleaned it down. So that's what we got. You see here, I replaced the metal gears, the plastic gears with the metal gears, and I made a little baffle because I relocated the receiver over here, but I didn't want to get oil splattered on it, so I made this little shield, 3D printed it so that the keep the splatter off of the receiver. I'm currently working on the turret, and as you can see here, I've done on the front of the turret with that little special trowel that I made, kind of smeared it down, and so that has a different look to it. And I did the back just like we did the rest of the hull, and then I'll have to do the sides. Put the brackets on first, because when you put the tracks on, tracks will go on top of the Zimmerit. But you know, this was Zimmerited after all of this was done, so we're going to have to come in and do some of the fancy work of troweling in the Zimmerit all around that, like I've done on some of the other features on the tank. Should not be a problem. I might be able to do that probably in 2 passes. Got a nice blank area here, so if I start out on one end, come up with so much Zimmerit work, and then come back down and finish that up. Maybe 3 passes, I don't know, depends on how it works out. And that's the thing with this, when you're working on a tank like this, it's all how it works out. What's best for you, what's easiest for you. Just remember, see, now this was put on a couple of hours ago. It's still workable. So you have any overlap, that is the best time to do it, is before this thing seriously sets up. This will be great for RC combat, in that there's it's actually stronger than the material it's adhering to. So it gives a good armored finish. The only thing is I might be concerned about is the paint, but that might work out if I just put on a couple layers of a enamel flat, which I typically use is the Testers brand clear flat. I use that on my model boats and my tanks because it is pretty durable and impervious to water. Okay, let's take a look at this guy. I've got the turret, the upper and bottom half of the hull, and the back panel assembled. And we're just going to pan around and take a look at what it looks like right now before he goes to the paint shop.